So I hear you've had some challenges and you're ready to give up. Get your coffee. Years ago, I had a friend. Let's call his name Bob. Bob was 5, maybe 8 years younger than me, and he was one of the brightest guys that I knew. He graduated from high school with perfect grades, and he graduated early. And then he graduated from university early. He easily got into a great law school, younger than most of the rest of his peers, and he excelled through law school. And that's exactly what he had wanted to do since he was a kid. He was great at school. He was super smart. Learning and the academic environment were a cinch for him. He really had no trouble with those sort of things at all. Academically, I was nothing like Bob. I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was in the 5th grade, and I nearly failed half of my 6th grade classes. School was not an easy thing for me at all. I graduated from high school with moderately okay grades because I had a great memory and I did pretty well on tests. And I did pretty well on tests because I could remember nearly verbatim the things that my teachers would lecture on. But I'm not sure that I read an entire book all throughout high school, and I genuinely thank God for Cliff's Notes when I was in high school. So on the academic front, I couldn't really identify much with Bob. But when Bob finished law school, he experienced a series of challenges in reaching what had been to that point his life's goal, which I found that I was able to speak into and help him with. The first challenge was the California State Bar examination. You see, though Bob had excelled in academic environments to that point, when he sat for the bar the first time, he failed. And that really hadn't happened before. And I really would be surprised if he had failed at much of anything in school to that point. So, of course, Bob had to wait to sit for the bar a second time. And he prepared again for a second time. He talked with other people that had taken it, and he did another one of the prep courses that was there for the bar examination. And I'm pretty sure the second time he failed as well. And he was probably being psyched out by the bar exam, but by that point, he was completely discouraged. As I said, academically, he had never failed. Everything had always been pretty easy for him. So this was the first time that he experienced what normal people experience, failure. And though it took him perhaps longer to experience failure and be tested by it than other people, at that point, he was in his early to mid 20s. He was learning the all-important lesson of how to lose and then to get back up. And that is an incredibly valuable lesson. We all need to learn that. And Bob needed to learn it as well. At this point, when he had failed the bar the second time, I think he and I were talking pretty regularly, probably weekly. He had grown up in the church that I pastor, and he looked up to me as his pastor and as a mentor, and he was ready to give up. Of course, myself and every other person in his life were telling him that, no, you're not going to give up. You're going to prepare and sit for the bar a third time. Now, he passed the bar the third time. Like the old cliches say, the third time's a charm, and if at first you don't succeed, try and try again. Old cliches, they are cliche, but they are also very often valuable truisms. But after Bob passed the bar and was, at least as the state of California saw it, officially a lawyer, he experienced his next challenge, which was trying to find a job as a lawyer. And over the next several months, every lead, every application, every interview turned up the same thing: nothing. And he couldn't find his coveted law job. And again, he was learning a valuable lesson, probably many valuable lessons, but they were hard lessons to learn, as they often are. And he, at that point, he was really good at school, but the world doesn't really work like school. School is a relatively new artificial environment. And while it might be necessary in a thought work environment like we live in, it still isn't the real world. For months, he could not land a job as a lawyer. And at one point, he thought of giving up on his dream as a lawyer and joining the military, but even that, the door closed for that. And then at another point, he reached out to me to share that perhaps God was calling him into pastoral ministry or even into church planting. Now, I've taught church planting and have coached church planters and trained them for years. And I think that sometimes people assume that when I, as a church planting teacher or mentor, when I meet a smart young guy like Bob who wants to be a pastor or a church planter, that I must be like super excited because, oh, here we have this bright person. But pastoring and church planting, they are a calling. They're not just a career. I remember very clearly Bob sharing with me at that time, almost word for word, something to the effect of, now that my big dream didn't work out as planned, I think I might want to try to plant a church. And as a pastor, I can tell you that that's not how or why you enter the pastorate or become a church planter. So I shared with Bob one of my favorite quotes from C.H. Spurgeon from his book, Lectures to My Students. And it was kind of a tough quote, but I've shared this with a number of people. And so this is from Spurgeon's book, Lectures to My Students. Spurgeon writes, "One brother I have encountered. One, did I say? I have met 10, 20, 100 brethren who have pleaded that they were sure, quite sure, that they were called to the ministry. They were quite certain of it because they had failed in everything else. This is a sort of model story," he says. "Sir, I was put into a lawyer's office." He literally says, "I was put into a lawyer's office, but I could never bear the confinement, and I could not feel at home in studying law. Providence clearly stopped up my road, for I lost my situation. And what did you do then? Why, sir, I was induced to open a grocer's shop. And did you prosper in that? Well, I do not think, sir, I was ever meant for a trade, and the Lord seemed quite to shut my way up there, for I failed and was in great difficulties. Since then, I have done a little life insurance agency and tried to get up a school, besides selling tea. But my path is hedged up, and something within me makes me feel that I ought to be a minister." Spurgeon says, "My answer generally is, yes, I see. You have failed in everything else, and therefore you think the Lord has especially endowed you for his service. But I fear you have forgotten that the ministry needs the very best of men, and not those that cannot do anything else. A man who would succeed as a preacher would probably do right either as a grocer or a lawyer or anything else. A really valuable minister would have excelled at anything. There is scarcely anything impossible to a man who can keep a congregation together for years and be the means of edifying them for hundreds of consecutive Sabbaths. He must be possessed of some abilities and be by no means a fool or ne'er-do-well. Jesus Christ deserves the best of men to preach his cross, and not the empty-headed and the shiftless." Hard words, but I think Bob needed to hear it, and I've shared those with other people over the years as well. And my final word to Bob on this whole situation was pretty simple at the time. Press on. Succeeding at anything in life is ultimately just a lot of hard work. Succeeding in a law career for Bob would just be hard work. He had already put in a ton of hard work to get to where he was at that point, even if that hard work had been relatively easy for him because of his cognitive abilities and his ability to do well in school. And so I told him, don't give up. Press on. Do the next hard thing. And eventually you'll find that even those hard things will become more easy. They will no longer be as hard. And that last conversation on that topic was more than 5 years ago. Today, Bob is a lawyer and doing well and a great job and serving in a church in another county. So why do I share all of this? Because discouragement is easy, and some people are content to stay in a constant state of discouragement because they won't keep going to press through the difficulty. They never succeed because they give up, or they give up too quickly or too easily. Progress and success are hard. Stop sulking. One of my favorite lines in the book of Exodus, after the children of Israel leave out of Egypt, but before they cross over the Red Sea to begin to go towards the promised land, they are kind of stuck and the Egyptian army is closing in behind them. And in chapter 14, right about Verse 15, the Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the children of Israel to go forward." Such an important word. Get off your butt, stop crying, move out. As they say in the military, Oscar Mike. Something to think about. We'll see you next time.